So the warning then that some of the policies of France's political parties fighting for power in the upcoming legislative elections are incompatible with business competitiveness, incompatible as well with prosperity, and that such proposals would inevitably lead to further deterioration of public finances. That comes from France's main employers' federation, Medef, as today it interviews one by one some of the top figures from each major political party. The warning from Medef that does not name any specific party, right, as France has already been given a stinging rebuke by the European Union's executive arm for running up excessive debt. Well, we're going to cross then to Medef's headquarters, speak to our reporter there, Clovis Casali. Clovis, just tell us then what's been happening there, because these interviews, they've already kicked off, haven't they? They've been going on for an hour or so already.
Absolutely, and this event is important for the candidates because, of course, in an election, you try to convince voters, but you also try to convince the business world. And this is exactly what the candidates are doing this morning with bosses' unions, various unions here, asking questions to all the main candidates, or at least the heads of the parties involved in these legislative elections. First to appear on stage, Edouard Philippe, the former Prime Minister, of course an ally of Emmanuel Macron, who's slowly taking his distances. And clearly when he was on stage, you could hear that his measures, the measures he was suggesting, the vision he was outlining, was that of a candidate for the next presidential election, even though for the time being, of course, it's first the parliamentary elections. What did Edouard Philippe, the former PM, say? Basically, he called for less EU regulation, less French regulation, and especially more help for the bosses, anything that can help improve growth. He said very clearly that growth is the only way to create jobs, and he also said that it was essential to help the middle classes by necessity in a way, because if you don't help the middle classes, well, democracy will be unstable, there will be democratic issues in the country, and that was for him a way of explaining the rise of the far left and the far right in the country. Edouard Philippe basically also saying that we were at a critical time in the country with these elections, with the possibility of seeing the far right or the far left in power, and that would be dangerous for the finances of the country and only increase deficits, which was for Edouard Philippe a major issue.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the top there, it comes, doesn't it, those bosses have been pretty critical of the programmes, we assume anyway, they've been talking about the far right and the far left programmes here.
Indeed, as we were talking about Edouard Philippe, all of what he was saying was sweet music to the ears of the bosses. I can tell you what the left wing is saying as we are talking now, because they are in the venue addressing the bosses. While it's not pleasing many of those bosses that were sitting near us, we could hear some of the bosses criticizing openly the left wing figures on stage as they were talking. Who's representing the left wing bloc? Not one person, but two people. Éric Coquerel for France Unbowed, the radical left movement, and Boris Vallaud for the socialists. They're both, of course, members of the New Popular Front, this newly created left-wing bloc that hasn't chosen yet a clear leader, and that's why you've got those two figures on stage. And Boris Vallaud for the socialists told the bosses this morning, or a few minutes ago actually, he was saying, did you do enough to help reinforce public services? Did you do enough to help reduce deficits? Did you do enough to raise salaries in your companies? Did you do enough to prevent the fracture of the country that we're witnessing today with the rise of the far right? The far right will be represented a bit later this morning by Jordan Bardella, of course, the president of the National Rally. And the rumor is Jordan Bardella could be on stage also with Éric Ciotti. Éric Ciotti, the boss or former boss of Les Républicains, what was until now a mainstream conservative party, the party that was once had Nicolas Sarkozy as president representing it, and a former party in power. And Éric Ciotti, who's now broken away, who's now more or less left Les Républicains, or is trying to break away from Les Républicains and move closer to the far right. Well, basically, he should be on stage with Jordan Bardella.